Welcome back to Throwing It Down with Mitty D. I'm just kidding. I'm excited to talk about the Indianapolis Colts today, last team in the AFC South. I will tell you who we're talking about next time, which division we're going to at the end of this episode, but you're going to have to wait till the end or skip to the end. I don't care if you really want to hear what's to come. Anyways, getting into the Colts, I'm going to try and make this super brief, unlike the last few. The Colts, they added Matt Ryan. I don't think they added anybody else. Or nobody else super important. Not even in the draft. They also added Stephon Gilmore to their cornerback room. And they did lose a receiver. I'm just not sure of the name. Brashad Perriman. Although he was gone last year. It really looks like they just lost T.Y. Hilton, Jack Doyle. But they retained a lot of their receiving core, although it's super tight. Their number 2 receiver, Paris Campbell, he's really a number 3 or number 4 for a lot of other teams. So that's a concern. Something that doesn't concern me is their offensive line and running game. You would think they'd be the best team because of Jonathan Taylor's just insane season compared to every other running back and running game in the NFL, but they were actually second in yards per carry, really disappointing. Second in yards, but they were efficient, and they're gonna keep on rolling. And with a more consistent quarterback in Matt Ryan, they lost Zach Pascal. That's what I thought. I was right. It did lose someone. Anyways, I'm nervous about Matt Ryan throwing to these receivers in the red zone. This is very different for Matt Ryan because he never had a running game that was strong enough to perform well in the red zone, while the Colts do. Their offensive line will come back, less injuries. Their main left guard, Quentin Nelson, was injured all year, and they had another lineman that had an injury for a bunch of the season or before the season. So that is going to be super important for the Colts, to help Matt Ryan out in those tricky situations. I will point another thing out. The Colts defense was number 1 in takeaways in the NFL. Sorry, number 2. But they were number 1 in fumbles lost, and that is the one, besides Indianapolis's rushing. They didn't have any individual player number 1 in any statistic this season except for Darius Leonard in fumbles forced. So he is insanely important to the team. He was injured last season. He's coming back healthy. This team is going to be something to deal with. They did lose a safety to the church. I'll pray for him. I don't know why he couldn't do both, but I'm not going to argue with the guy. He can live his life. It just stinks that their continuity is a little inconsistent, adding a cornerback, losing a safety. They really retained their defensive front, which is important. They had a very disruptive defensive front. Their passing game was very miserable last season. They were 26th in yards and 17th in yards per attempt. They had very little interceptions, but that was really the only thing that was positive about the team. Carson Wentz, he could have done more, but with the running game so important to this team, he didn't need to do that much. Now, they did not reach their potential, as illustrated by Pro Football Reference's expected win-loss statistic. They expected the Colts with 10.6 wins and 6.4 losses, while they got a regular season record of 9-8, which is mostly because of losing to the Jaguars in the last game of the season. They missed the playoffs. An insanely disappointing end to a really good season. The Colts had an insanely tough schedule, being the number 1 team. Last year, they faced the Bills, who were super tough. They faced a lot of really good teams, and They started out 0-3, which is something that is almost impossible to come back from, really, just for the simple fact that games in the NFL are so close as they are. Teams can show up on any given day that you don't want to waste the first 3 opportunities of the season to get at least 1 win. It also gives teams against you just that little extra itch to beat you, to keep you completely defeated, and to not allow you to get the first win against them. The Colts have a pretty tough schedule, being second in the AFC East. Of course, they have games against the teams in their division like the Texans, Titans, and Jags, which I give them a very high chance of winning all those games. I'm low on the Titans this year. While I was really high on them last year, the Titans could be very unpredictable, to say the least. The NFC East games, very winnable. They're facing the Steelers, the Vikings, and the Patriots. Winnable games. And especially with the AFC West games mixed in here and there, they're going to try and take advantage of these games, not against those teams. So in reality, the Colts, have a very simple, easy schedule compared to the Jaguars and the Texans. And the Titans, because the Titans have to play Green Bay and the Bengals, while the Colts only have to play the Steelers. Steelers have a good defense, but they're not the Bengals. They're not Green Bay. And they also play the Patriots. The Patriots, they're just kind of like middling. They're not really improving that much. They're not getting that much worse. While I think the Colts did improve their passing game, and if they can continue their defensive strength, it's only going to get better for them. It's hard to improve off of a stellar season. Having the second most takeaways in the NFL is something that is hard to, improve at, just because there's so much room for less production. I see the videos at 10 minutes again. Gosh darn it. I'm going to give the Colts... they're winning the division. I think I said the Titans were going to be 8-9. The Colts are going to be 10-7. They have tough games against the AFC West. The one scary thing I see for the Colts, I think I mentioned it a little earlier, is Matt Ryan in the red zone. When he was with Julio in Atlanta, they would rarely connect in the red zone for touchdowns. It would be to other players, and I would argue that the Colts have worse talent, not than last year's Atlanta, but than previous year's Atlanta when they still had struggles. I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, so I would know, just in case you're wondering. But that's one of their biggest, that's one of the Atlanta's biggest issues, just in general. But especially over the last 5 seasons, their touchdown rate is much lower than the NFL average. If you think that Carson Wentz is worse than Matt Ryan, you're going to only think the Colts can go up from here. They're going to definitely improve on their 9-8 record last season. They're going to win the division, and they're going to improve. Their numbers may not improve that much, but I think their consistency will. Just because Carson Wentz has these really good games with, impressive throws, and then he has games where he throws 3 interceptions and goes for 190 yards, and then it's a whole mess. So Matt Ryan's definitely going to bring the consistency. Well, also, wearing a Dr. Pepper shirt. I'm sure you guys will love that. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video of the NFC East. See ya.